Just the new chairs.
Better than the old ones they used to have in here.
It is 7 o'clock, which is our appointed meeting time, and a quorum being present, I'd like to call this meeting of the Gettysburg HARB to order. We'll note as organizational items, we have the review and approval of the agenda. The agenda that has been prepared has been altered. There are 2 revisions. Item B has withdrawn. The applicant has withdrawn their application for consideration at the November meeting. And item C the owner has also withdrawn that application because they could not be present tonight. So items B and C have been removed from the agenda, which leaves items A and D. Are there any other corrections or additions to the agenda from any board members or the staff? All right. I'm looking for a motion to approve the business meeting agenda of October 16th, 2024, as altered.
So moved.
Is there a second? Seconded. Suzanne, seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so we have our agenda set for the evening. The second item is the meeting minutes from the September 18th and August 21st meetings. Are there any? I'll start with the August 21st meetings, which we received right before the September meeting. Are there any corrections or alterations to those minutes that anybody has to bring to the attention of the board? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the August 21st meeting as the official record of this board.
So moved.
Second? Second, Andrew Johnson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The meeting minutes from September 18th, 2024, which were received during the last few weeks since that meeting, are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? If not, I'm looking for a motion to enter the minutes of September 18th, 2024 as the official record of this board.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Clem. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition signify by saying nay. We'll note that the motion passes without opposition or abstention. For those in the room, since there are some new faces, I'll simply again introduce the people sitting at this table. From my right, your left, we have Deborah English, the Environmental and Historic Preservation Administrator for the borough. And next to her, Karen Mesher, Administrative Assistant to the borough, whose duties include facilitating and recording secretary for HARB. Both Deborah and Karen can be full participants in discussion, and Karen can ask for clarification from you and can also may ask you to speak up since she has to keep the official record. But they are not voting members of the board. The voting members in front of you include Mr. Paul Witt, Mr. Brandon Stone, who's vice chair. I'm Gary Schaefer. I serve as chair. Suzanne Christensen, Andrew Johnson, and Mr. Clem Malott, who's the BCO for the borough and therefore fills the position of the designated building code administrator for the Historic Review Board. That is a board, the full board is 7 members. We currently have an opening, but we do have 6 of us present, so there is a voting quorum. Before we go on to the public comments, I do want to announce that the National Park Service had asked us to continue at least the review portion of the review into November, and we're going to honor that request, which means we will not be presenting any motion for consideration tonight on the Gettysburg Station conceptual plans. However, Mr. Harrison is here. When we discussed it, he is here to listen to some of the items that may be brought to the attention of the board. But there will be no presentation tonight, or there will be, or no?
It's really a pleasure.
Right. All right. Saying that, we'll move to the public comment for items not on the agenda. Those are any items that are not just specific to items on the agenda that anybody wants to speak to. Again, like all public meetings of the Gettysburg Borough, we'll limit each presenter to 5 minutes of presentation, and hope people can honor that. Are there any issues that people want to address that are not related to one of the projects on the agenda? All right. Seeing no one asking to speak, I'll move on to item 4, and public comment for items on the agenda. And this is a place for anyone who is not directly related to items on the agenda to speak about an item on the agenda. And any comments related to the Gettysburg Station conceptual design presentation need to be presented at this time. So this is your opportunity to present your thoughts or information on this project. Is there anyone who wants to choose to speak at this time? Okay, I would ask that you go to the lectern and use the microphone. It should pick up what you're saying, but...
Suzanne Castile, 131 South Washington Street in Gettysburg. I just wanted to speak on the design element. I'm quoting from the Gettysburg Times, September 25th, and I noticed in that article about the project, the new proposed project, in the newspaper, Gary Schaefer was quoted as saying, "I would simply have to say that we're following our guidelines, that there should be nothing that prevents better style contemporary buildings from being built into the historic district." Well, what is the purpose of having a historic district or a HARB? It brought that question to my mind. If we're not going to have new buildings fitting in with the historic older buildings of Gettysburg, it's not gonna, it'll just kind of destroy the whole look and history. I mean, right, that project that's going up, if it's going to be built, can it be built in such a manner that it looks like it fits into the historic district and not contemporary looking buildings or contemporary fixtures? Because right across the railroad tracks, we have the historic Gettysburg train station. We have a lot of other historic buildings in the neighborhood, even if they're not Civil War era buildings, they're historic. So my concern is, if something new is going to be built, can it look like it fits into the historic district? Or what's the purpose in having a historic district? If it looks just like urban America anywhere USA, if we don't keep the look of Gettysburg. That's all I had to say.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
I'm Gary Castile. I live here in Gettysburg. And I must be very honest with you. I moved here from down south. And folks, I am in shock. Gettysburg has a lot of history. And it concerns the Civil War. There was a man who came to the town in 1863. His name was Robert E. Lee. He brought a few of his friends with him. But also what he brought with him was the economy you're enjoying today. Like it or not, it is what it is. Mr. Lee did a good thing. And to take these buildings, tear them down, reconstruct, and make them into some god-awful, ugly, contemporary design is taking that history and throwing it right down the commode. If that's your intention, then that says a lot about you. This is Gettysburg. This is one of the most historic towns of the North. If you look down south and you say Williamsburg, everybody knows it. Why? Because the history is there. The buildings are there. And it is maintained, not changed, corrected, or removed. Y'all need to think about what you're doing. It's that simple. It's called intelligence. Thank you.
Anyone who wants to speak next, please indicate so. Okay, if that's it, everyone has an opportunity. If you want to speak, now's the time. Yes, sir.
I'm Toby Bortner. I live at 138 West Broadway. I guess I'm kind of new to this with what's been going on. I've been trying to keep up lately. But I guess I look at it, used to live in Stratton Township, and now I look at the development that's going on in Stratton Township, which is a lot. A new housing project going in across the street from where Haas's is, housing being built from Hunterstown Road, flowing all the way over to Old Harrisburg Road, 151 new homes there. The apartment complex, I think, is 250 units. So I question why we would bring this development into the borough when there's an enormous amount of development going on outside of town. This development's going to be behind with regards to sales, occupancy, and all that stuff. So what's going to happen to it when it sits vacant, when we already have all this other housing going on that's being developed around it? I don't feel that something like this needs to be in the borough of Gettysburg. I mean, we already have congestion problems now during tourist season. It's going to be tenfold worse, I think, if this gets built. So I just hope that that's being considered by everybody who is involved in making these decisions. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Okay. Again, I ask if anybody wishes to speak, to please move to the rostrum. If not, my intention had been to ask board members following a presentation by the architect, but rightfully so, they've elected to attend the next meeting with the architect. I had intended to simply ask the board if any new information was impacting their decision that they should let Mr. Harrison know about. But with the lack of information, I'm not sure that there's purpose to that. But I will ask the board if any members want to speak, even though we're not questioning a presentation. If any members desire to speak, they can do so now.
Well, I would like to hear Mr. Harrison, if he has a brief presentation. We can't go out all night, but yeah, do your thing.
Thank you very much. Charles Alexander, the project architect, is on his way to freshman parents' weekend at Lehigh and asked to be excused, and it would be a pretty heartless developer who would say no. My name is Tim Harrison, and I'm no architect. I am the developer from Staten Island, New York. What I could do, I'd certainly be able to answer any questions, but is just illustrate a couple of changes that we made at the suggestion of the board based on the September 18th meeting. One was the color of the brick, which looked awfully dark. And what we did in the meantime was to bring those material boards tonight, and there are actually a couple of different options. But we were searching, and there were I recall at least one public comment on this, with desiring a more reddish color of the brick. And of course, we have no objection to that. Maybe I don't know if I could grab it, but the option on the right is much more red than what we were. That's it. Thanks, Deborah. Than what we were proposing on the 18th of September. So again, there's not going to be a recommendation tonight anyway, but perhaps the board would consider that to be a step in the right direction. The other suggestion, and Deborah, this is going to be into the presentation where we adjusted the pedestrian level lighting, and we adopted fixtures there seemed to be a consensus that coalesced among the board members on different options for pedestrian level lighting fixtures. So we've now superimposed those onto the drawing so you could take a look at what they look like. It's toward the end, I think, Deborah. Let's see if we can find it. A little further. There we go. So there. That's the fixture that the board suggested would be more appropriate, and that gives you a little better representation of what it would look like on the site. Those are really the only changes that we made to the presentation that you saw at the September 18th meeting. A little bit more red and the pedestrian level lighting. But I'm certainly more than willing to answer questions if the board or the members of the public here have any. I'm not an architect, but I'll do my best. And if I can't answer them, I'll write them down and I'll get you the answers.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Harrison? Okay.
Very well,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you.
I have a statement I could make. The tall building in the middle there, from this side view, this is a six-story building, one story beneath ground.
That's right.
On the other side of the building, it actually is a seven-story building because the property does slope downwards.
That's correct.
Is it the same level?
Yeah, the top is,
Top is the same,
Flat,
the
yes.
top two buildings?
The top's the same level, it's just the finished floor elevation is 15 feet lower. Actually, Deborah, there's a representation of that somewhere. There's kind of a, I don't even know. No, it's like a side view of the different buildings. Let's see. Maybe go the other direction. I'm sorry. Yeah, keep going a little further. There, okay. So now you can see, yeah, okay, so there's, you see how the north side of the site, the finished floor elevation is 15 feet. So you see that on the right there where Deborah has her cursor, that's a first floor, but that first floor doesn't exist on the left side of the building because the finished floor is 15 feet higher.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
So we mentioned doing like a mock-up, right? Is that something that you're still planning on doing?
I'd be happy to.
Post like settlement on like what we chose, as far as what you're specing? I
I'd be
guess?
happy to, yes.
Terrific.
Be happy to do mock-up.
Additional questions? As I noted, we've reviewed this in two full presentations in September and October, and we'll act again. We'll act in November when we review. I appreciate the different selections in the masonry. At this point, though, with no further questions from the board and no action to be taken this evening in deference to our partners in the National Park Service, I think we'll move on from this item on the agenda.
Very well, thank you very much. And we'll see you in November.
Thank you.
All right, since the public comment period has ended at this point, we'll move on our review agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you, safe travels.
All right, the next item on the agenda is item D, which is a major project, but I have a fiduciary relationship there, so I will be recusing myself and allowing Brandon to run the meeting. And we'll hear the presentation, or we'll respond regarding the application.
Give you a moment. Thank you, Gary. Deborah, while Gary's getting positioned, could you give us the background information?
Sure. This is for project COA 24-0077 for 423, 430, 432 South Washington Street, which is owned by Wellspan Properties, Inc. Project scope is demolition of 2 residential buildings on the same parcel. Wellspan will be donating this parcel to construct 2 new residential structures for a total of 3 dwelling units between the 2 residential units. all applications must meet the Department of Interior Historic Guidelines. The structures are on our 19, I think it's 31 Sanborn map. Both structures or the 434 and 432 being 3 stories with 1-story rear frame porch and Slater tin roof. Some of the addressing on the old Sanborn maps don't match some of the current addressing, but I believe that is the location of those two. 428 is a 2-story frame structure with a 1-story rear frame porch, also with a slate or tin roof. Staff recommends discussion with the board members for the demolition of the 2 existing residential units, review of the certified structural engineer's report, and proposed design of the new buildings through Habitat of Humanity. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you. So Gary, as the architect on file, are you presenting tonight?
And Mr. Tyson's here also.
Good evening.
As far as a representation from Habitat for Humanity, I can summarize again what was presented at the last meeting.
And we'll give.
Kind of informally it was presented, but basically we have 2 properties on South Washington Street. The one is seriously deteriorated, has not allowed human occupancy or actually any type of visitation into 430, 432. It has significant structural damage, and even the engineer, when the engineers went through last year in 2023, someone went through one of the floors partially. So that building is structurally unsound. And the building to the north of it, 428, is a modest dwelling that had been occupied by WellSpan and some others for program use, but has been vacant, my understanding is, for 7 years. And the goal is, as I noted last meeting, the goal is WellSpan is working to provide the demolition of these buildings and present a clean site to Habitat for Humanity for the construction of 2 structures. One would be a duplex unit, one would be a single-family unit. The lot, as you noted in the information, you had a full packet of information. The lot is a single parcel, or a single lot, but there's 2 parcels. Habitat would reestablish that separation so that it'll allow ownership. WellSpan's interest in the properties, these 2, they're willing to, very much willing and anxious to transfer to support low-income and moderate housing in the borough. They also hope to, in working with Habitat, have some minimal amount of parking, access to some parking on the site, while giving Habitat and the new owners access to their properties and parking for their vehicles. That will be resolved as we'll get to watch when the properties are subdivided. The buildings have minimal architectural interest other than scale and their modest design, which are characteristic of that street, that block. So we will want to be very careful in developing a design that is also modest, but at least mimics or represents the same scale as the 2 buildings that are there. We do not want to change the character of the street other than putting life back onto these sites with families living in the building. so that is where we are, and I'm violating my own rule. Are you picking up my voice, or?
Yeah.
I didn't go to the rostrum. The specifics of the proposed buildings will have to be approved by this board. So this board will get specific design review of each structure. And that would be a normal HARB review if the demolition of the two structures is approved for transfer of the property. And Mr. Tyson in our meetings has said that while habitat is limited to special architectural features in some ways, they can do certain things that are necessitated by building in a historic district or anything. And the intent would be, as I notified their designer, that we would not be using vinyl siding on the structures. While the current structures are vinyl sided, we would hope to be using an alternate siding, cement board or pressed board or something that would allow future painting or have a different look to it, be more substantial. And also, and I'm getting a little bit into the design, although that still has to be developed, the board last month commented that even though these buildings sit right on the edge of the sidewalk, that the board would entertain a design that moved them back slightly so that there's some buffer, and also allow porches, which neither of these buildings have. Now, in saying that, I also want to say that there would be a correct way to design a modest porch that maybe better reflects the whole front of the duplex, but covers the center two doors, reflecting the building that was there, which has a combined entranceway that was used, just because it most likely is original timber from the area. I think that house is the older of the two structures, it appears so, having gone through that one recently, 432, 434, I would have been in close to 20 years ago when it was first damaged, when it was being used as the construction headquarters for the medical center next door. It was following that use that there was water damage that developed that was unchecked for a whole winter, and then resulting structural damage to the property. It was condemned and sealed. But as I said, these two buildings, we've been working with WellSpan and Habitat. I was trying to remember when Mr. Craig Long was vice president of the hospital, but I think we get very close to 20 years on these properties that I know that they've been talking about.
From our perspective, we've been working with WellSpan for about 4 years now to get to this point.
Wow. 4? Wow.
Do you have any idea approximately when these structures were built? Do you have any idea approximately when these structures were built? After 1863, is that correct?
Yes.
But, yes, but in being forthright, there's been discussion about whether 428 has a small piece of what would have been an original portion of the house in the mid-section. It would have been a 1 1/2 story, either one room down, one room up, but the second floor was removed, and there's very little original structure left We may uncover some original foundation, but it was added to the rear and added to the front, and I'm gonna say both of those additions are very late 1800s, early 1900s.
I believe, Deb, you said the Sanborn map from 1921?
1931.
1931
Showed
shows
and
it.
the last one that we have in our records is 1912.
And in that one, it
Did not have it.
So they are post-1912, pre-1931,
Yes.
to give you a ballpark.
Yes.
Which I think one of the concerns was put forth by the Adams County Historical Society, that 428 was actually a Civil War home by Abraham Bryant. And we're of the opinion now that it is a couple houses to the north. And so these homes are non-Civil War homes, and based upon the engineering report, the 430 and 432 are in pretty severe disrepair. 428, however, though, in the engineering report, seems as if it is a usable structure. And that poses one of the questions in the demolition guidelines, which is, has it been considered to relocate the structure?
And I'll speak, or else Mr. Tyson will have to go to the mic, and if you want him to speak, I'll speak to the whole issue that you raised. Andrew Dalton, the director of Historic Gettysburg, Adams County, and the museum, he and Tim Smith came in and went through the buildings. They researched the buildings and just really had little to no interest in 432, 434, could not uncover anything that represented what was happening in their interest.
Yes.
428 they had interest in, and they got in to see. Once seeing it, their interest was expressed in letters to us being able to perhaps investigate the foundation when the building came down, just to see if there was any artifacts. But they had no interest. They would have been the
Thank you.
agency that we would have hoped had an interest in perhaps restoring what was there.
Yes.
They had no interest in it. They didn't find enough of the original fabric or original structure to merit any interest in preserving it.
But from
So
a
that-
structure itself, though, it is,
Structure would be usable, except that to get the property for Habitat to provide their program, remodeling and renovation skills, and I wish Andrew hadn't left, but remodeling and renovation skills are very specialized in compared to kind of fabricating the pieces in a factory with supervision. And therefore,
right,
you said basically that Habitat has had minimal success or interest in doing
We just
rehabilitation.
don't have the skill level.
Would Habitat consider, though, putting the house up for sale for $1 and having somebody relocate it to another location in the borough?
I hadn't thought of that.
So that is one of the guidelines. We have a very specific set of checklists that we need to adhere to when reviewing the demolition of houses within the historic district. And so one of the critical questions, of course, is the engineer's report, whether or not the structure in the house is habitable. And barring the report for 428, it implies by the engineer that 428 is a livable structure. It needs renovation, of course. And so that, it seems as if it might be, given the time between when the hospital wants to get rid of the building, when Habitat needs to take ownership of the land, there may be an opportunity in the community to sell the house to somebody who can pick it up and move it. And now, I don't know how feasible that is, and the real question comes down to, it seems like it should be given an opportunity to see if somebody could make use of the structure.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So where, the house would be taken from this location to another spot in town?
Yes.
So I'm on the Board of Habitat, just as a disclosure, so I know a little bit more about this project than, because we've been working on it for a long time. And as a realtor, I'm not sure that, I hear what you're saying, but I also don't know where on earth there's another lot in Gettysburg. There's not. It's not very that's not highly likely, just because there's no lots in town.
Okay.
But just to say that out loud.
Right.
If there was a bunch of lots that somebody who is just interested in keeping this building for the historic nature might want to do that, but so they would have to buy the lot, which is worth a vacant lot would be worth a lot of money. I'm just talking about the feasibility of this whole thing, because I've not heard that before.
Okay.
So the feasibility of buying a lot, having to move this house, which would cost X number of dollars, and then rehab it on top of that,
That's correct.
yeah. So-
And again, I am just following the due diligence
I
that's
understand.
outlined in the
I under-
ordinance that specifically specifies, has it been considered to relocate or salvage the property?
Yeah, I
So-
understand. I'm just thinking through this,
Mhm.
in the actual,
It seems like there may be an opportunity to provide a public notice that, say, the project moves forward, this property may be put up for sale for $1.
Habitat,
go ahead, Bill.
First of all, rehabbing a place, when we build a house, part of the cost of the house for the inhabitants is utilities and energy efficiency. Oops, sorry. And to rehab a place like this would be, we can never get it up to the energy efficiency standard that we normally
Understood.
do.
And by no means am I suggesting Habitat rehab this house. I just want to be clear on that. But what I am saying, at some point in time, the hospital plans to transfer ownership over to the Habitat. And it may be prior to that, the hospital puts the house up via public notice if
Okay.
anybody was willing to
Yeah, you
acquire
answered
it.
my next question, because this is, to do this is Wellspan's issue.
It is
Okay.
Wellspan's issue.
Because they already tried to get us to take possession of it before they scraped the houses.
Mhm.
Our board said, no, we're not doing that. So
Understood.
it's a Wellspan issue.
Correct.
Kind of washed my hands of this.
And again, I am somewhat constrained. The ordinance is very specific on the processes that we need to go through. So many of these things involve the site plan as laid out on there, the definition of property boundary lines, the intention of attempt to salvage materials in the property. And to be honest with you, there's an entire checklist that, as board, we have the responsibility to make sure that we're adhering, because ultimately, it comes back to the borough for the administration of the land use and certificate of appropriateness. So, at that point in time, though, we're after the point where the buildings can be saved. And the challenge for us is the loss of a historic structure is a loss of a structure. And one of the other aspects in our guidance is the public good of a new project. Does it outweigh the existing structure's value? And so I think the Habitat's mission and the idea of affordable housing in the community is absolutely critical. And so there are other aspects of this that I think are really positive for the community. So Gary, at this point in time, I would like to have the board members be able to just sort of ask questions directly to you, if that's possible.
What?
Have the board members ask questions. I was trying to stall a little bit to have Andrew come back. But right now, hopefully, Paul, do you have any questions?
No.
And Suzanne, do you have any questions?
I do not.
How about Clem? Do you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay. Thanks. You guys are very helpful.
Sorry.
Okay. Could you? I really don't want to go into proposed findings of facts in the absence of a board member because I don't have enough board members to vote. Are you voting?
I can, because I asked Deb.
You don't have a financial relationship.
I mean, I would be willing to step down if that's what I had to, but she said I don't have to.
Okay. Now, I can tell you, Gary, when I was exploring the properties, what I noticed is in 428, there is a basement grate that is a cast iron grate that is in the, and it is the same grate that happens to be in the Gettysburg Welcome Center, which tells me this building is, most likely there was a foundry in town that made basement grates at some point in time, and it was common. But to find two identical grates in two buildings that we are proposing to demolish is just sort of ironic. No luck?
I did not see him.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
If there's, obviously, any direction the board goes is reasonable, but it is definitely reasonable to stipulate that any architect, any artifacts or
Salvage.
pieces of that type of nature, grills, anything that seems to have architectural interest or salvage be done so as part of any demolition.
Okay.
The buildings are small enough. The windows are not historic. The windows themselves have been replaced. They're not any of the original wood multi-pane windows or anything.
Yep.
So that type of stuff would be little interest.
And the salvage of
You can tell
the
the doors are not historic.
428's roof on the rear is one of the classic Gettysburg tin roofs. It is somewhat deteriorated, but I'm not 100% sure if it's not actually worth salvaging that roof.
Those roofs are better salvage, those roofs are better staying on the building and being restored.
Yes.
Which is an easier process than removing.
Trying to peel it up. One of the questions, and this is more directed to the borough, is currently right now, these properties are zoned healthcare institutional, both of these. Do you know if the planning department has any intention to actually convert this back in, since they're doing the planning zoning rework right now? It seems if we're talking about creating residential properties, we probably shouldn't keep them as a healthcare.
I think they were looking for some overlays in that area to go back to residential, so I'll have to double check with John. He's kind of doing that, and that's certainly something we can, suggest to make some of those changes to
That was
the
actually one
current
thing that
ordinance.
came up in my review was I grabbed the map and, where did I put it? I'll show you, I'll pass this down. So the properties are a little more, they are this little blue healthcare zone right there. And so it's this little spit right there, and it goes the whole way back. And I'll show you this as well, Suzanne. It's that right there. And so based upon current zoning, these properties, even if they were transferred to Habitat, would technically still be zoned healthcare. Now, within that, the acceptable use for a healthcare zone is residential, but it is also homestay, which I know the borough is very concerned about.
Airbnbs?
Airbnbs. And so, again, it's one of those permitted uses by right. And I think in addition to, one of the conditions of the demolition request is this has to go through all of the appropriate channels in terms of the borough. I think the borough needs to make a note of this to make sure to evaluate the status of the zoning for these properties if the board so approves to actually do this. And of course, WellSpan transfers it to Habitat.
I think that's what I want to John for review and
Please.
look at that with the new ordinance.
Because I think that would probably, I don't think it would be a dependency on doing this, but fundamentally having healthcare properties that are residential properties in nature, not owned by the hospital, it's just an irregularity. And since we are doing the zoning review,
Right, sure.
and I see, Andrew, you've come back too. We went through a questioning and answering phase. Do you have any questions of Gary?
I do not. Thank you.
One of the things that, Gary, you mentioned was the setbacks, and the setbacks for the property. And currently, the property to the south is the WellSpan OBGYN clinic. It is set back approximately 25 feet. The properties to the north are also set back. And what I realized in walking by the properties earlier today was that even if they were only set back 10 feet, they would still not, they would jog out from the other properties. And I am now wondering if the alignment between the buildings down the run may actually make sense. When you develop a site plan for this, which I'm assuming you'll be the architect working for the actual submission when Habitat does that, it'd be nice to see what the properties look back in alignment with the buildings versus having them, because I know in the examples that he showed, it was right on the sidewalk, and then there was like maybe a little tree lawn between the porches. I'm now looking, when I walk by there today, it just seems like these two houses are actually in alignment with the OBGYN building.
Well, of course, where the medical center was, there were 4 townhouses that sat right on the street also.
Yes.
Not super old ones, but of similar construction to the ones farther up Washington Street to the north that sat right on. And unfortunately, that was another debate during their demolition and construction of the medical building.
I think it would be interesting from the board's perspective to see how the site looks. Now, while everything else on North Washington Street tends to be right on the sidewalk, it just happens in this area, things bump back out. And so I think there's an opportunity for a little bit of urban planning as it matches in there, since these are new constructions. And, you know, at that point, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Habitat's going to use your services for the submission? Do you?
I think it's important that these houses, and we'll obviously have that discussion if this is approved to redesign them. I think it's important that these two houses sort of anchor the end of South Washington Street. This was a rural transitional area, so you have the two houses that set back, then you have these houses that step forward, then we have the houses that were demolished a few years ago by the Dobbin House, in the Dobbin House property.
Right.
They had set back, these became larger properties and the houses spread out and set back, at least on Washington Street.
Yes.
So I think it's kind of important that these two houses, as you noted in notes to me, mimic what was there pretty strongly. And I would add, anchor the end of the building, because from here out, it becomes very open and commercial.
It does.
So,
And again, we can talk these items when you come back with a presentation at some point in time.
Just as a side note, I think that part of the hospital's giving of these properties is that they're going to maintain a little bit of parking in the back.
Okay,
And so
So they will be.
that will affect,
where you could put the house on the property. So is that gonna be a function of, because to be honest, we have a partial site plan, which again, a site plan is a requirement for the demolition request. And in it, it appears to be the site plan of the current properties, not the proposed properties.
it
And,
is
Well-
the site plan of the existing conditions, which is what has to be reviewed, because it's a demolition.
correct. And so you're understanding, Suzanne, right now, that what we're seeing in here would be very similar to what would be desired by the hospital?
well,
Because right now, that is more than half of the lot is, at least in 430 and 430.
they don't exist right now.
The parking lots?
The parking spaces do not exist.
Well, I'm confused.
they?
This is the actual site
Do all
plan.
those, I thought those parking spaces, or do they exist or not? I don't think they do.
There's people parking back there.
Yes, those parking,
But all of them on that
Yes.
side?
I believe this is the actual site plan as required by the demolition request. Deb, can you zoom out just a little bit?
Well, in the proposed development, you'll get a different site plan.
Not so much. I need to see the title block in the bottom right-hand corner, Deb. Could you zoom back in?
This was just completed.
Oh, so that is new.
Site plan prepared by. So for our consideration to be complete, we need an appraisal of the property. We need a letter from a certified engineer on the status of the property. We need a letter of intent for the use of the property. We need a site plan of the property's design. So one of the things I want to make sure is in the information packet that we have all of those pieces of information, Deb. And as far as you know, we have met the requirements for the submission for a demolition request according to the borough requirements.
I would assume so. We have the packets. Everything that was submitted, I provided to the board. We have the well-span letter. We have the engineer's report. We have the site plan, so I believe we do have everything we need.
Well, at this time, if the borough has acknowledged that they have received all the appropriate materials, is there any more questions by the board? Well, then I would like to read the proposed findings of fact. And Gary, you don't have anything more to add, do you? Okay. The structures at 428, 430, and 432 South Washington Street are located within the boundaries of the Gettysburg Historic District and thus come under the review right of this board. These are sensitive buildings as defined by the Borough of Gettysburg Code of Ordinances, being over 50 years old. The buildings are contributing structure to the Gettysburg Battlefield National Registry Historic District. Though having limited architectural integrity and few original features, they do represent simple examples of both the folk Victorian and Second Empire styles. The Secretary of Interior's standards and Gettysburg Design Guide both play a critical role in our historic preservation process. The proposed work is considered a critical project, with a request to demolish existing buildings requiring formal checklists and conscientious review by this board. As such, I ask the board to please consider the following items. Whether the buildings under consideration for demolition contribute to the character of the historic district, or if the buildings have significant historic character. Credible evidence that the buildings cannot be feasibly or reasonably reused or are structurally unsound. A commitment from all parties to transfer and to rebuild on the proposed site. Demolition is necessary to allow a project that will have a substantial public benefit, and demolition will result in new buildings that will improve the character of our historic district. Finally, no demolition may occur until all permits necessary for the project, as well as licenses, zoning, land use permits, or other necessary documents or approvals have been attained or met, and the agreement set forth in Chapter 11, Section 110, subsection 3D, has been executed by all parties. And that section is the relevant ordinance defining demolition in the borough. At this time, do I hear a motion to recommend to Borough Council approval for the application as presented?
Yes.
So moved.
I have a motion made by Suzanne and second by Paul. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion has passed. Thank you. And at this time, I will give back the gavel to Gary, and we will conclude the meeting.
Well, the stuff that remains to do,
There's a lot.
well, As Brandon has pointed out, there's significant paperwork and documentation to be presented as part of the actual demolition permit application.
Who's going to tell Wellspan? Is it not you?
I'm sorry?
Who's going, what happens, how do you let Wellspan know that, what transpired?
So right now, we are a recommending body. And so our recommendation goes to Borough Council, who will meet.
That the Borough Council allow the demolition of the building, which would then allow you to submit the demolition of permit officially.
And so they'll meet on November 16th,
No, the November 12th.
November 12th, excuse me.
We have a holiday on Monday.
You're
so
going to
we-
September.
Second Monday.
Thank you. How many times have you done that?
November 12th.
November 12th, okay. At that point in time, council ultimately has the authority to override our decision. So I would wait until that date to actually determine whether or not they approve our recommendation. Thank you.
Okay?
And if you have any further questions, Deb can assist you with the checklist process, as it is quite daunting.
Okay, we'll move on the agenda. We'll move to item A under the reports, the administrative approval since last meeting. Please look at those if you have not already done so, because I'm going to want a motion that says, I move that HARB certify the certificates of appropriateness approved administratively as appropriate action, as appropriate to the Historic District Ordinance.
I have a question, if I may. Item B
Yes.
appears to be a notice of violation that then was administratively approved.
They are doing in-kind restorations. There was some issues with safety with a railing.
Okay,
So they are just restoring everything in kind for the porch and the railings and columns and the floorboards.
can I get a better understanding what the notice of violation was?
The railings were loose and it was a safety violation.
So interestingly, the Catherine Foster House at 155 South Washington Street, which is on our agenda item, has a single 2x4 that is the second-story railing. And so I thought it was strange that they decided to withdraw their application, given that right now they have very minimal safety in place for the second story of that floor.
Well, if it's, I guess if they put a temporary fix, this one has no temporary fix and the railings are loose
Okay.
and not secured.
They have no railings, just, I'm not sure how many people went to the
Yeah.
155.
it's in
They
very
literally
bad-
have no railings at all. They just have a,
He's been dealing with them for several months now
Okay.
with a notice of violation, so we're working through that. But
Okay.
they were gonna do some changes to the materials, and I notified them they would have to come through HARB, so they're gonna do all in-kind replacement and just use all the same type of material styles and the woodwork that's on there, their ornate railings and spindles, they're gonna, I think, restore or have them made to match what's there.
okay. I couldn't find any examples of the railings, so I'm curious to see what that will look like.
Yeah, I mean, there's two floors, the first floor, or the top floor, I think, did not, and I think the second floor had more of the ornate spindling.
That porch isn't original.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
it's in really bad shape, and it's not, it's a safety issue, so.
yeah, absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
So they're gonna work through that.
And then item F on here, which is somewhat interesting, is replacement of a slate roof with a slate roof.
Correct.
I don't think I've seen a replacement of a slate roof at my time in the board here.
We've had some, not a lot.
Okay.
We maybe have 2 or 3 over the 4 or 5 years I've been here, so.
I'll be interested
not a
to
lot.
see how that one turns out,
Yeah.
because finding qualified contractors to be able to do work like
Right.
that is
is correct.
pretty impressive.
All right, I'm looking for a motion therefore that a motion for the HARB board hereby certifies the certificates of appropriateness approved administratively as appropriate actions to the ordinances of Gettysburg Borough.
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? Clem, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I'm going to do a brief report. We do have a presentation, if we do keep on schedule as we've done, that'll come under the public comment. But my report, I'm simply going to say the receipt of the letter from the Park Service today was a surprise. But since we are a certified local government, we are, and the certified local government is done through the Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission and the National Park Service. It seems to me that in our position, we really can't deny a request from the National Park that is simply a request to allow us to look at this and have input. So I elected to accept their request for a continuance. And I think Mr. Harrison and Charles Alexander are going to try to meet with them to help them see what the concerns are, because it's all basically view shed, impact on the view and impact on the sight lines. So will be, I'm sure, part of our discussion at the next meeting. Deborah, do you have a report that should come to our attention?
I am getting some responses back from the paint peeling letters that I sent out for restoring some of the buildings in town. We had a couple of permits coming through and some folks calling me to meet on site, so somewhere between 131 and 150 letters we distributed through the main arteries in town, so we're getting good feedback. Not as much as I would like, but
Okay.
so, that's all I have.
Okay. And now we have, were you expecting a comment from me on that? We have the public comment, the presentation on the materials?
Yes, yep. Do you guys have anything digital you want me to plug in, or you can actually just plug in yours if you want?
This is that duration project.
Yeah, right.
The product.
Right.
Yeah.
And more importantly, Andrew, it counts as a half an hour of our mandatory time. Thank you very much for arranging.
You just state your names and your
Anna
company.
Knapp, right? Thank you.
Yes, I am Hannah Knapp with Duration Molding and Millwork. Hello, everybody.
And just to refresh your memory, this is that product that
Yeah, that's right here.
I brought in, that we had underwater that was in that jar.
I represent U.S. Lumber, a wholesale distributor of building materials pretty much across the country. We distribute all building materials, including Duration Molding Millwork.
Yeah, this is on.
Your name is?
My name is Dave Wolfert,
Spell your last name?
W-O-H-L, F as in Frank, O-R-T as in Tom.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, thank you. We distribute a product that's been around for quite a while, formerly called Boral. Now it's called True Exterior. Durations takes the True Exterior substrate and can literally make just about anything you need out of it. It's very popular in the historic areas, industrial areas, and I won't talk anymore. I'll let Hannah talk about it and show you some of the things that are possible and a little bit about the substrate.
Steal the show. Thank you, Dave. And I am assuming I need to stay here in front of the microphone. Is that best?
Thanks, Dave.
Microphone there as well,
Okay.
and it might be a little higher.
Higher and easier for me to see my own stuff, right? Dave, will you be Vanna for me if I need?
Certainly.
Dan, do you want me to ask you to run, or-
Sure. I'll pass them around if you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, thank you for having us. This is an exciting product that I'm thinking some of you may not have been exposed to before. And so I'm going to jump in a little bit to the kind of guts of what this material is and who my company is and what we do with it. So the name of my company is Duration Molding and Millwork. We are based out of New Jersey. We are what I would call a custom mill shop specific for composite products. So not for all wood siding, not for wood materials, but this is for a composite material called polyash. Has anybody in this room heard of polyash other than Andrew? Oh, all right, we got some people that are familiar. Boral, is that, all right, good. So there is some familiarity. This is great. I'll do a little bit of a refresher on this for those in the room that are not familiar with what polyash is. Polyash is a blend of polymers and fly ash. Fly ash being the byproduct of burning coal, which is still done here in the United States in certain areas. Historically, fly ash would go into the landfill. There was very limited use for it. Sometimes it would be used as a filler for carpetbacker, filler for drywall, but as a predominant ingredient in a building material or anything really, it had very minimal use. So the parent company basically came up with this brilliant idea to use fly ash, an already burned material that's a fine dust, mix it with polymers, let it kind of turn into a slurry, extrude down a line, and extrude it into trim and siding, resulting in a composite material that now has a high level of recycled content. There is no wood filler or wood fiber in it. Now, some may say, well, hey, we like wood, and there's a lot to say about wood and the benefits of using wood. But there are also some cons, if you will, to using wood. It cycles moisture. It has the potential to rot. It has the potential to decay. When it cycles moisture, in many cases, paint will push off the face of wood. So if wood isn't properly maintained or installed properly, it does pose issues long-term as an exterior material. So that's why we like polyash. There's no moisture cycling. It's a dimensionally stable product. You can install it pretty much anywhere outside moisture-prone areas. You can paint it any color. There are a number of composite materials out there that don't allow you to paint it dark colors. You have to be very mindful of what types of paints are used on the products. This is a material that can take high heat and can take heat retention, and it's not going to move across the wall. So this is a picture, what you see on this slide here, it actually shows you what the fly ash looks like before it is mixed with polymers. So again, burned at the factory, a very fine particulate goes up the smokestack, has to be collected per EPA regulation. There's a heavier sediment that goes to the bottom of the smokestack, but it's that fine, very fine flour-like material that is used as the basis for this. So the beauty of working with polyash for any exterior millwork, siding, trim, replicates metallion, but out of polyash, doing the exact same work that somebody would have done out of bronze. And we were able to do that far faster than the original company that was going to do it out of bronze. And so we edge glued polyash together, about 5-foot panel wide, and then used our CNC router to get the depth and the impact and the sharp lettering for this medallion. Now that medallion went out to the job site. Here's a picture of it before it went out. And they painted it with a bronze paint to make it look like a real cast bronze medallion. The secret, don't tell anybody, the secret is, it's us and polyash. Also showcasing the bracket there in the bottom right. That is a real life size bracket next to a real life human. I left the human in the picture because I wanted that to have scale. So you guys could see the size of the brackets that we can do. We can go far bigger than that, but that was one of our most recent brackets. President that started inaugural proceedings at this church, and every president since Nixon has either sworn in or started their inaugural proceedings at this church. High profile church. They needed to reface us. So after 3 years of permitting and process and layers of approvals, Duration Molding and Millwork is now the go-to for replicating all of that old original wood millwork on the bell tower. And originally they were just going to do a handful of pieces, but when they saw the cost of putting the scaffolding to get up to the roof and to get up, they said, we're going to do the whole thing. We don't want to start now, take it all down, and in 5 years go back up and do more. So we're refacing the entire top part of that bell tower. And so this is an example of what we're doing. In the middle, you see the original, right? Those louvered windows, or louvered openings, if you will, are just shy of 8 foot tall. So that picture top left is our replication, polyash, structurally reinforced in the louvers, with a bronze screen behind it to keep the pigeons out. But I kept that picture there next to a commercial door, again, to give scale for what we're doing with those louvered openings. Now, there's 4 on each level. There's 8 of those bad boys going up there. In addition to that, you'll see in the right-hand corner, that's part of the archwork, right? So if you look at the center picture, there's archwork there with plinth blocks that goes over the louver. On the right is our rendition of the archwork. The contractor working on this job disassembled everything piece by piece, sent it to us, and we basically scanned, measured, made shop drawings, and did perfect replications. This is another up-close shot of some of the higher level detail, things that you might not really notice, but these small details are things that we're replicating and sending piece by piece back out to this project. We're very excited about this. This is a big deal from a historical perspective that downtown DC would say yes to using polyash and duration. This is just an example of how we can work really well here in Gettysburg. This is another example, Old South Church in Boston. Church was built in 1669. As one would expect, the materials are slowly falling apart that were used originally, or even probably second edition or third edition of replication. And now this church is coming to us, so as they need to replace things like the coins, the balustrade, the brackets up top, the dental moldings, the window casing, they also send us these parts and pieces, or do a drawing to scale, send it to us, and we're able to replicate. So this is why I'm excited to teach you guys about duration and polyash moldings. I'm just going to flip through some pictures here of historical replication work that we've done in the past. On the right is an old pilaster base or a column base. On the left is our replication material that's not going to rot or wick up moisture. Brackets, we do these all day long. This was 8 different brackets. The contractor thought he was going to do this as well until he took it off and started sanding. He wanted to sand and repaint. And he realized that if he sanded and repainted that material, he was going to be back there doing it again in another 3 years. So we did a bunch of polyash brackets for him. Each one of those is about 2.5 foot tall, 6 inches wide, 8 inches deep. Corbel replication. Plaster. This was from a Great Hall in Baltimore. Gentleman was redoing the inside. This is an inside Great Hall, all custom plaster moldings. And he was tasked with trying to save as much of it as he could, or salvage as much of it as he could. And he broke a single 9-foot piece. And with plaster, there's a long lead time and a long cure time and a lot of craftsmanship that goes into replicating old plaster molding. So he sent us a little cut-off piece that he broke, and we were able to replace that 9-foot piece in, under 2 weeks for him, and he was able to install it, paint it, and move right on with his project. Here's a pediment head. The old original up top, a dental molding, and so much of it had rotted away. The original owner of the building wasn't sure he would ever get replication, but they sent it to us, and we were able to use a 3D scanner and kind of fill in the blanks to be able to reproduce that out of polyash. Door trim, we're not just windows, we're not just moldings, we're not just crown, we can do door trim. This is gingerbread replication. This was actually off new construction. It was a house in Altoona, Pennsylvania. They did a gorgeous gingerbread trim detail all along the gable ends, and the carpenter bees demolished all that wood trim. So they were able to cut a little bit off of it that hadn't been damaged too badly by the carpenter bees, sent it to us, and this was our replication. So they were able to put something back up that was no longer going to be food for the bugs. If you have a project here in town that needs to carry a load, historically, polyash is not load-bearing. It is not a structural composite material. It is a normal composite material, right, or a normal trim and siding where it's not going to carry a load. However, with my company, if you need it to carry a load, need it to span something, want to have a bracket that carries part of a shed roof, we can do that using a local metal fabricator. We'll figure it out. We'll work with your team. We can structurally reinforce items. We can send out shutters. I walked through town, I saw a number of shutters. Now granted, shutters here really, I think, are more decorative, right? We're not looking for impact resistance here in Pennsylvania. Yeah, yep. So, if you were talking to me about shutters in Florida, I'd say maybe let's have time out and talk about this in greater detail. But here in PA, decorative shutters all day long, we can do that out of polyash. We'll reinforce a little bit where the hardware is, and we can replicate whatever was pre-existing. This is just showcasing polyash being used as a flower box. Why does that matter? Because polyash isn't going to wick up moisture. It's not going to rot. It's not going to check. It's not going to fail. It can be used as a planter if you really wanted to. Painted black, no less. For us, we don't need much. In many cases, we can do what we need to do from a field sketch, from a diagram off an architectural set of plans. If it's real complicated, we might ask for a piece of something to make sure we get it right. And in some cases, we'll do a prototype first to make sure everybody from top to bottom is happy with what they're getting. So, for a custom mill shop, it's a premium product, and we want to make sure that everybody that is invested in the material or in the project is getting what they need. So walking around town, I saw this downtown. You guys know this one? Yeah. I was checking that out. All of those brackets, all of those corbels, all of those column wraps, all of that really unique detail at the gable end, the paint's flaking off of it. That's a lovely structure. But if there ever comes a time when those things need to be replaced, we're the ones that can do that for you out of our mill workshop with material that's not going to do the same thing that this original material did. Same with this, some of that unique detail, panels underneath windows, very unique molding over the top. If that ever needed replacing, absolutely. The arch trim in the windows, absolutely. Special brackets up top at the roof line, absolutely. As you saw earlier in some of my pictures. We've got a lot of information on our website. I'm always around to answer questions and do more in-depth product knowledge workshops, installation workshops, the whole 9 yards. I do continuing ed stuff for the architectural community. If you ever would like to send somebody to us for more information, please start with the website, and then you can reach out to us at info@durationmillwork.com. If you want to learn more about the custom things that we're doing on a regular basis, Instagram is where we're posting. Now, I tell you, I hate Instagram, and I am not a social person. However, I've been forced to be one because I work for this company. But if you want to just peruse and get some great ideas and see some of the cool things we do, check out our Instagram. And thank you very much for your time. That's all I have, unless there's any questions from the group.
It's heavy. I mean, how do you, on a piece of, on the moldings or stuff, how do you fasten it?
That's the only thing I was going to ask you to.
Fascinating. All right. So depending on, you fasten it with fasteners, I tell you.
Is there a particular fastener that?
So it depends on what it is. So if you're going to work with our beveled siding, we say a 60 or an 80 ring shank nail. If you're going to work on a siding project, I would say step into a stainless steel fastener. It's not required. We say hot dipped galvy. But I say if you're doing a premium siding on a really nice project, the last thing you want is some X brands hot dip galvy to eventually fail and now rust and stain the face of the board. So I say step into stainless, but it's not required. We also say there should be, if you get into water management, I'm going down a rabbit hole, but if you get into water management, use a drainable, weather-resistant barrier. Moisture is going to build up in walls. Moisture is going to get behind siding, and you need to give it a way to get out, especially with this material, because this doesn't cycle moisture, so there's no way for it to breathe. Water needs to go somewhere. That's along the installation conversation. When you get into the more custom things, you would use a standard wood fastening tool, standard wood fastening fastener. So if you're doing a thinner trim profile quarter round, you could just use a 18 gauge trim nail. If you're doing a square edge 1/5 5/4, you would use trim fasteners like you would use for wood. When you get into the heavier stuff, and depending on what your wall is doing, then we might want to consult with you about best practice. Because, for example, we're doing a custom job in Ohio right now, and they're using 2x boral material, or we're using 2x boral material, turning it into 8-foot panels, 2x10x8. That has got but that is going to be a heavy, heavy, heavy piece of siding, and it's going into a wall that's built out with poly, so like 2 inches of foam, sheathing, like this whole build out. And we need to have a fastener that goes far enough in to a stud to have enough strength to not only hold that 2x material on the outside, but get all the way into penetrating a stud to have that carrying. So that's an example of where we'll do a one-off conversation with the building owner or the architect or the GC to be like, let's make sure the installation is going right here. Let's make sure you're using the right fastener for a super heavy, super deep, whether it's a molding profile that has a lot of weight to it or a siding profile that's custom. That's a long answer, I'm sorry.
And butt joints, just butt?
Butt joints, butt tight. But I'm tight, if you're gonna do beveled siding with us and you're gonna run that tight to each other, I'm gonna want one fastener in the face of each butt joint, otherwise it can be blind nailed 16 on center the rest of the way. Those butt joints should be close enough to hit the stud. I want fasteners hitting studs to the best of the ability.
So is there some sort of guarantee, or is there some sort of, you use our approved installers, and then a side-by-side guarantee with that? Or
We don't have, we're not that big to have a whole series of installers across the country. We do have installation guidelines on our website, and the expectation is that whoever's doing the install is reading those first. And our warranty is the same as Truex's warranty, so the primary manufacturer of the product is a 20-year warranty on the substrate. Then when we take it and mill it or glue it or lock miter it, then we put a 20-year warranty on the work that we do. That all kind of goes hand in hand, but that is all contingent on your installer installing it properly per manufacturer's and/or durations installation guidelines.
One last question.
Sure.
This may sound like a stupid question, but do you get resistance simply because it's not wood in historic, is there resistance to the material being used to repair some of these buildings?
In some cases, yes. I would say it's maybe a 70-30, meaning 70, once they see it painted, they learn the benefits, they see it in applications like downtown Washington, D.C., 70% of the folks understand the value and they see that it's going to look like wood and read like wood and they say it's okay. And then you have maybe 30% of the historical review boards still in America that kind of stick to their guns around wanting wood no matter what.
We have so many
Maybe because there hasn't been
variations of
products.
sidings, from vinyl to hardy or fiber cement to engineered wood, all of them. They all have different boxes they check and don't check. This product checks mostly all the boxes, from bury it in the ground, paint it black, very little, minimum to no movement whatsoever, doesn't cycle the moisture, no freeze thaw issues. It really, truly, and when it's painted, like I said, you cannot tell the difference between this product and wood.
I agree.
You really can't.
And you're recommending something to somebody who's not then going to have to maintain it nearly as long as they would, right?
Right.
The most maintenance that goes with this is if you want to change the color of the house.
Correct.
Really. Or if the paint fades, there's UV fade no matter what, right? So paint has a fade life. And if it fades to a point, right, nope, you're not scraping it. Yeah. Not unless there's some existing damage from like a tree limb that came down, then there's an obvious repair. But
So
yeah.
as no workshop, your siding, for example, so the example in the presentation earlier is hardy panel, hardy shingle. A standard piece of hardy siding, say 12-foot length, is about $13 a piece. What does your comparable siding cost in that same price size?
From a cost perspective, you're looking at probably 4 times more. 3 to 4 times more. This is not, when you look at fiber cement and polyash, they're not even, when you look at the benefits, the pros, the cons, they're not even in the same category.
And it's not painted, correct?
It's not painted, correct. So you're going to paint.
Pre-finished siding, so for example, they had like the ironwood over there, that came from hardy pre-manufactured. Now, it's not $12 for a piece of siding, but the challenge is many of our homeowners in the district resist basic maintenance.
Yeah.
It
That's
is.
what I'm saying, this is a great alternative.
That's gonna give you more maintenance than this ever will.
Well, and one of the downsides from that is certainly
the upland
the
cost.
setback requirements for everything. You have to.
You have to be-
Cut things right up is an
Yes.
easy way.
You have to be I've sold fiber cement before, and you have to be so spot on with your install. And even then, if it's not done in the right if the siding isn't right for the application, even if it's installed perfectly, it will still have problems over time.
And all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it's a toss of the dice, but if you want to eliminate as many of the potential downfalls as possible, that's kind of where polyash comes in, but you're going to pay for it. It is not going to be in the same price category.
So you also mentioned earlier you laminate pieces. What's the mechanism to laminate? Do you have a specialized glue?
Yes.
Okay.
I can only give away some of my secrets, not all of them. We have a special surface prep that we do, and we work with a private boat manufacturer locally to where we are, and he has a proprietary marine grade epoxy. So he uses that marine grade epoxy on manufacturing boats that go in saltwater and in freshwater, and that's the same glue that we use for the stuff that we do in-house.
Any, Karen?
Yes.
Two questions. I guess those knives or whatever that you cut and mold, are they safe for like forever?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And my second question refers to like floorboards on porches. Is that slippery or hot to the touch?
We will not produce floorboards for porches with this material. It's not designed for that. Yep. Yep.
Thank you, and I think that was public comment, which was the end of our agenda. So if there's nothing else, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you have an ESR report for these?
15 minutes to spare.
Who would have thought?
I think most of that would be
Only
found
one thing on
online.
the agenda.
I tried to look.